and there's no way that it could have traveled from Central Asia to Africa in the time span we're talking about with that kind of cultural history if it hadn't existed there before. So cannabis evolved along with in the same ice age type of pattern as human beings did, and found its way pretty much into this landmass. There's no evidence of cannabis existing in the North American continent before explorers arrived. The little documented evidence there is very sparse. Furthermore, the tribal groups here that have existed have their own traditions and their own psychoactive plants that they've kind of formulated at the basis of their traditional cultures, and you can see that. Their stories, cannabis is not one of them. So we're talking something more that was brought here. It does very well. You can see in BC how culture is caught on. Very vibrant plants. So in our ecosystem, for example, we're living in a tropical rainforest. It grows extremely well out of doors, although we have a shorter growing season than most places will do, in a temperate rainforest, I should say. It'll grow very well out of doors. It'll have all the water it needs. It generally has the sunlight it needs. It's not going to have to be working too hard to survive. It makes it in my personal experience, outdoor medicine in BC is very nicely balanced, and very often an excellent choice for use as a consistent and a consistent and quality product for medicine. So you always get a very good balance of cannabinoids in the plant. They're grown outdoors and kind of left to their own devices in this part of the world. For a couple of reasons. One, we have in this part of the world another plant that is a symbiote to human beings as well, in psilocybin mushrooms and a mycelium that grows along the northwest coast down to California from Alaska, but that's a totally different topic. It relates in, but as part of human beings evolving along with cannabis, we can see right here how we're doing it on a daily basis, and doing the work that I've been doing and taking it forward in terms of a medicine, in terms of a food source, and in terms of trying to adapt our economies. Perfect example of how hemp can be a future part of British Columbia. We have a suffering pulp and paper industry right now. What are they called? The wood bugs. Pine beetles. The pine beetles just devastated the forest and just destroyed our lumber industry. Well, if we were growing hemp in our farmers' fields in this province, we wouldn't have to shut down pulp and paper mills up and down the coast, because they could just they're already geared to produce paper, and all you have to do is turn them over to produce hemp paper from hemp that we're already growing. The great part about growing hemp for paper and clothing is that you have a byproduct of hemp seed for food and fuel. So we're talking about two products, and one is not the primary intent. So you have a double primary industry being developed, as well as a secondary industry coming, or that you're basically rescuing from its demise in this province. So huge amount of potential for hemp in BC to be used proactively for good. And the only thing standing in the way right now is the law, but I don't really have to expand upon that. I don't know.
Well, what I was going to do was pull up last year's power.
Go over more cultures if you like, yeah.
Well, I'll just flash them, and we've got like a minute or so a thing here, so just kind of say a comment.
Ancient Egypt, the pharaohs did use hemp. They imported it by and large, although they didn't just import it. This is another part of African hemp history that's very interesting. Pharaohs didn't just import cannabis and generally hashish resin from Afghanistan and the Central Asian region. They also imported cannabis from the Red Sea, Nubia, and Central Africa. So it's been growing there for a very, very long time. You can go ahead. What I found, there was a news item recently that discussed the builders of the pyramids and how the laborers who built it weren't slaves. They were paid well and actually treated very well. They found some graves apparently where they had been buried and treated with respect if they died on the job. So we're talking about a culture that was fairly aware of what it was doing and why. Pyramids were not built totally as tombs, they were built partly as even saying religious sites wouldn't be totally accurate. They were built to reflect the pattern of the stars in the sky at the time, to bring energy down to Earth, and to communicate with the stars. So we're talking about, and this is one of the ways that cannabis has influenced these traditions, is that part of the meditation of the priests, the mathematician priests and the astrologer priests in Egypt who came up with these things and designed them to the specifications they design them now, were under the influences of cannabis-based intoxication, along with other different herbs and spices from these regions, like incense we see today, only a little bit more active in terms of what you were putting into it. The Egyptians also used it. Oh, what's this one? Well, that's Japan. Yeah. Japan also has an interesting history of hemp use. Very little psychoactive hemp use, but it's extremely popular as a clothing item and in religious worship. So another place where it would not grow very well psychoactively. It's a tough growing season, short growing season. We're very, very hardy, heavy stock, lots of seeds for survivability. Just an example of how the ecology of a region changes how hemp would grow, and then how people develop along with it. Their culture has taken it as a non-psychoactive plant, but it's a very special ritual one, much like the ancient Chinese did before it was introduced to medicine.
They probably would have used, made the base structure of their houses out of bamboo, but they probably made the paper to cover their houses out of hemp.
Been there.
Because they wouldn't have used the forest.
No, and that's interesting. I'd have to check. I've been to Japan, and I don't remember being hemp paper, but
More anciently than modernly.
Yeah,
I would think.
okay.
Because they're very ingrained into their traditional patterns for clothing.
Mm-hmm.
They're very stylized hemp leaf that's ancient.
That's very possible.
A lot of that work, I'll show it to you when we get back.
Okay. Other cultures that have used cannabis along similar lines. The ancient Hebrews, the anointing oil that's talked about in Exodus includes what amount to 9 pounds of cannabis and 6 liters of olive oil. It's cooked in there. Like, you're pouring that on yourself, you're applying it. Not only is it going to be an excellent medicine, but in that kind of concentration, it's probably going to enter the bloodstream. If you look at the way the rituals are described in the Old Testament and Exodus, it's